Just as I was about to clock out for the day, a text message lit up my phone. Deposit received, $3 million, salary. My first thought was that it had to be a scam. I opened my banking app with shaking hands, but there it was, plain as day, $3 million sitting in my account. And the sender? My own company. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I couldn't make that much money in an entire lifetime. My first instinct wasn't to celebrate. It was to return it immediately. Call me cautious, but I've seen those news stories. If money lands in your account by mistake and you keep quiet, you can get in serious trouble. It's called unjust enrichment. If it went to court, paying it back would be the least of my worries. I could end up with a permanent mark on my record. I've kept my name clean my whole life. I wanted to keep it that way. So, instead of going home, I headed straight to accounting. Did the company just send me a wire transfer? I asked Heather, trying to keep my voice steady. Heather did accounting, HR, admin, and reminded everyone whenever she could that she was also the boss's sister-in-law. Normally she walked around like she owned the place. But today, her expression was tighter than mine. Yeah, she said quickly. And you really shouldn't ask me about it. I just do what the boss tells me. You do know how much you sent me, right? I asked, holding up my phone. She rolled her eyes. Are you hard of hearing? I said if you've got a problem, take it up with the boss. Our company was small. Everyone could hear everything. Her voice was sharp, mine was getting louder, and a few coworkers were already looking over their cubicle walls. And right on cue, the door to the boss's office opened. Cole. My office. Now. Ross didn't wait for an answer. He just disappeared inside. Heather shot me a smug little look, like she'd already won something. I ignored her and walked to his office, heart pounding, clutching my phone like it was going to save me. When I stepped inside, I realized he wasn't alone. His wife was sitting beside him, dripping in jewelry, her nails perfectly done, a designer bag parked casually on the desk while she trimmed her cuticles like this was a spa and not a struggling company. Ross leaned back in his chair, smiling like we were just having a friendly chat. So, he said lightly, you've got a problem with your commission? My commission? I echoed. He waved a hand. 3,000 is nothing to complain about. In this economy, you should be grateful. 3,000. That's when something clicked. A few months earlier, our second team had taken on a big client. The project manager got pushed out, surprise, and Ross called me into his office for tea and a heart-to-heart. Cole, he'd said back then, clapping a hand on my shoulder, the company's going through a rough patch, and this client is important. I really need you to step up. You take this project, I'll give you 3% commission. End of year, promotion and raise. I'll make it worth your while. It was a $1 million contract. 3% meant $30,000. $30,000 isn't life-changing money, but for me? That was several months' salary. So even though my own team was already drowning, I said yes. For 2 months, I ran myself into the ground. I called in favors, found extra vendors, negotiated with media, haggled on ad packages. I pulled late nights, lived on takeout, and lost 10 pounds without even trying. The project finished. The client was happy. The bonus never showed up. And now I finally understood why. The client had paid. Ross had just decided to give me 3,000 instead of 30. I kept my voice as calm as I could. So, the $30,000 commission you promised is now 3,000? Ross's smile vanished. His eyes went cold. You're not satisfied with 3,000? And when did I ever say 30? You said 3%, I replied. 3% of 1 million is 30,000. He let out this short, ugly laugh and turned to his wife. See? Give them an inch, they take a mile. You can never feed some people enough, they're always looking for a fight. His wife nodded sympathetically, like she'd spent her whole life being victimized by ungrateful employees. Ross turned back to me. I said 3% after costs. Projects don't run on good intentions. You've managed projects, or did all that go over your head? That was not what he said when he begged me to take over. Back then he'd made it sound like straight up 3%, no fine print, plus a promotion and a raise. Now, suddenly, it was 3% of pure profit. Even then, the math didn't add up. There was no universe where 3% of this project, profit or not, was only $3,000. I could feel my temper rising. If I'd known I'd be killing myself for 2 months for just $3,000, I never would have taken this on. Ross's face hardened. Am I not paying you a salary already? Show me another company that even offers commission. I've been generous. Generous. Right. His wife stepped in, putting on her mediator voice. Cole, you shouldn't have argued with Heather out there. That hurts morale. Things we could discuss calmly become complicated when you raise your voice. I almost laughed. I didn't argue with her. I was trying to return the $3 million transfer the company sent me by mistake. The irony was almost painful. Ross was trying to shortchange me, and I was the idiot trying to protect his company. His wife blinked. $3 million? $3 million, I repeated. She quickly recovered and gave a weary sigh. Look, don't blame Ross. Blame the client. They were the ones who caused this mess. He'd pay you more if he could. That part actually confused me. For all the nonsense, the client had been fine. Straightforward. It was a traditional brand, nothing like those tech companies full of tricks. They'd treated me with respect. What did the client do? I asked. They short paid the contract, she said. You don't know? The $1 million project? They only released $500,000. That's the only reason Ross could give you $3,000. I turned to Ross. Is that true? Of course it's true, he snapped. Why would I lie? You want me to bring Heather in here to back me up? I took a breath and let it out slowly. All right. Then give me $15,000. Half of what you promised. I won't ask for the full 30. He stared at me like I'd grown another head. Are you deaf? There are costs. Costs. Do you understand what that means? Great, I said. Then let's calculate the costs. I manage the project. I know every dollar that went out. We can settle it properly. At that moment, I still believed there was a line he wouldn't cross. I told myself, if Ross acts like a decent human being, I'll send the $3 million back the second I walk out of his office. If not, well, then I'd have to think hard about what to do with that money. Ross froze like he hadn't expected me to push back. Then he gave this cold little laugh. You want to audit me? It's not an audit, I said. It's settling accounts. I pulled out my phone and opened the project file. Right there, in front of him, I started listing the real costs, media placements, cheap influencer packages, production expenses, basic overhead. The kind of public relations project where the quote looks sky high but you and I both know the actual spend is a fraction of it. Even if the client had truly only paid $500,000, the real cost of the campaign was around $200,000. That meant at least $300,000 in profit. 3% of $300,000 is $9,000. Not 3. Ross's face was turning a shade of red I'd never seen before. He slammed his hand on the desk. You're an employee, he hissed. You walk in here and start doing math with me? Who do you think you are? I dropped the pen on the desk. Facts are facts. Take out the real costs and there's still over $300,000 left. And that's if I believe the client only paid half. He snorted. You're ignoring operational costs. Internet, electricity, rent, those aren't free. You use the office, you use the company network, that's all money. Or do you think this place runs on air? I stared at him. I honestly couldn't believe he was saying this out loud. Fine, I said finally. I dragged the pen across the paper and arbitrarily knocked $20,000 off the profit line. There. Operational costs. For a team this size, that's more than generous. We're still looking at $290,000 profit. He was shaking with anger now. Are you out of your mind? What about client kickbacks? Discounts? You think clients don't ask for rebates? Without even looking up, I scratched off another $90,000. There. Kickbacks, discounts, whatever story you want to tell. $200,000 in profit left. That left my 3% commission at $6,000. I was literally bargaining myself down. But at that point, it wasn't about the number anymore. It was about dignity. Ross stared at the numbers, his jaw clenched. Then he jabbed a finger in my face. Fine, he snarled. You want to talk costs? Without this company, you're nothing. And if we're counting, you are the biggest cost of all. For a second, the room went completely quiet. And then I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I finally saw him clearly. I bust my back for his company, give up my time, my health, my sleep, and somehow I've become the biggest liability in his mind. What's my cost, exactly? I asked softly. My salary is my salary. Commission is commission. Are you planning to charge me for existing now? Ross's face twisted. He turned toward the door and shouted, Heather, get in here. Bring that file. The one with Cole's attendance record. A minute later, Heather walked in with a thick stack of printed pages. She laid them out on the desk like she was presenting evidence in court. Ross slapped his palm onto the papers. I've been giving you face, he spat. But if you want to argue with me, fine. Let's talk about how many times you've been late, left early, or missed a day. Let's see who owes who. I glanced down and felt my stomach tighten. It was my clock in history. Every minute of lateness, every early checkout, every day I'd left after midnight and dragged in late the next morning, it was all there. Some entries were from 3 years ago. From the year I joined. That's when it hit me. Ross had been keeping this in his back pocket for a long time. I remembered those corporate horror stories online. Small companies that comb through 3 years of attendance logs to fire someone for cause so they don't have to pay severance. I always thought, that's awful, and then kept scrolling. Now I was the one standing in front of the stack of paper. Ross folded his arms. See how tolerant I've been? Keeping you here this long was already charity. Heather smirked. You were awfully confident when you came to check the numbers with me earlier. Where's that energy now? My hands started to shake. When I joined the company, Ross had told me, personally, we're flexible here. Clock in is just a formality. As long as you get the job done, I don't nitpick. Now my late arrivals, most of them after nights of unpaid overtime, were evidence of misconduct. I turned to Heather. You really don't remember why I was late on half of these days? I was in the office until 3 or 4 in the morning pushing your projects over the line. She shrugged. No one forced you to stay. If you can't finish during normal hours, that's a problem with your efficiency. Why should the company pay for that? And the worst part? Ross and his wife both nodded like that made perfect sense. In that moment, the stupidest thing about the whole situation hit me like a punch. 10 minutes ago, I had been on my way to give them back $3 million. I'd been ready to save them. From their own mistake. Now they were lining up reasons to fire me without paying me what I was owed. Ross's wife sighed and softened her tone again. Cole, I usually don't interfere in company matters, but this time you really went too far. Relationships are mutual. Ross has given you a platform. You should show some loyalty. Ross nodded. Think about it. Without this company, where are you going to lead projects? I gave you a chance to prove yourself. Instead of being grateful, you come in here trying to pick me apart. It was incredible. To them, this wasn't a simple transaction, I work, you pay. No. In their minds, paying me what they owed was a favor. A handout. Something I should bow over. But one thing Ross's wife said stuck with me, relationships are mutual. They were smart. And I was done playing dumb. You really believe that? I asked quietly. That things should be mutual? Of course, she said. You keep your head down, do your job, and we'll pretend none of this happened. And the commission? I asked. We're just done with that? Ross snorted. What else do you want me to say? Either you accept $3,000 and stay, or you can quit. I'll write it off as feeding a stray dog. I nodded slowly. All right. I'll think about it. His wife smiled. We know you're emotional right now. Take your time. There's a client waiting outside, we'll be right back. They swept out of the office like they'd just done something noble. As soon as the door shut, the mask dropped from my face. Inside, it felt like a stampede was running through my chest. 3,000 instead of 30,000. Attendance evidence. Threats, gaslighting, guilt tripping. All while $3 million sat in my account because Heather couldn't be bothered to double-check the transfer. Mutual, I muttered. Fine. Let's make it mutual. I pulled out my phone and called my wife. Hey, I said, keeping my voice low. I need you to go to the bank. Right now. She instantly panicked. What happened? Did you do something illegal? No, I said. Just trust me. Take my card and withdraw as much as you're allowed in cash. Max limit. I'll explain when I get home. As soon as I hung up, I called one of our main vendors, a guy named Mike I'd worked with for years. Hey, Mike, I said. You still keeping track of how much Ross owes you? He let out a bitter laugh. How could I not? I've been chasing that guy for months. Good, I said. Get every supplier you can find who's waiting on payment from him. Bring them all to the office. Today. Today? He said, stunned. You kidding me? Last time we showed up, security blocked us at the lobby. I've lost count of how many times he's dodged us. Tell them this, I said. I saw the company's account. There's money. A lot of it. Ross is about to move it. If they want to get paid, they need to come now. There was a beat of silence. How much is a lot? He finally asked. 3 million, I said. I've got proof. He swore under his breath. All right. I'll make the calls. But if this is a joke. It's not, I cut in. And send me everyone's invoices. I'll need the numbers. After we hung up, I sent him a screenshot of the transfer. $3 million from the company to my account, clear as day. He replied with nothing but 3 raised hands emojis. Then he stopped typing completely. which meant he was already making calls. A few minutes later, Ross and his wife came back into the office, practically glowing. "Money really does attract money," Ross said, rubbing his hands together. "That client was a good omen. We've got another project lined up already." His wife glanced at me and gave him a quick look, like, "Don't forget." Ross cleared his throat and smiled. "So, Cole, have you thought it through?" I stared down at my hands for a moment, then put on my best conflicted face. "Yeah. I have." I forced a weak smile. "Between commission and opportunity. I think opportunity matters more. The market's rough. Jobs are hard to find. I'd like to stay. If the company's willing to give me another chance." He burst out laughing and clapped me on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. See? I knew you were smart. Stick with me and you'll go far. Actually," he continued, "we were just talking about a new project. $200,000 at least. We're going to need someone reliable to run it. Naturally, we thought of you." Even now, he was still trying to sell me dreams. I put on my best grateful expression. "Really? That's... wow. How big is it again?" "Minimum 200,000, he said proudly. "But we have to front some costs. I'll have Heather wire the money out of the company account in a bit. Contracts are signed, everything's ready." I smiled and nodded while, in my head, one thought kept looping. "You have no idea your account is already empty." His wife suddenly leaned forward, eyes fixed on my phone. "Cole, we'll definitely let you run the project. But we need one thing from you first." My guard went up. "What's that?" She pointed at my phone. "We need to see your contacts. To protect the company. Delete the client list in front of us. Then we'll all sleep easier." And just like that, everything became crystal clear. There was never a new project. There was never an opportunity. They wanted to use the promise of a future deal to get me to wipe my client contacts. Then, once I'd cut myself off from my network, they'd fire me. Exactly like they did with the last project manager they pushed out. And if I handed over my phone right now, they'd also see my messages with Mike. They'd know about the suppliers on their way. They'd know about the screenshot. They'd know everything. I tightened my grip around the phone. "I'm not comfortable with that," I said. "It's my personal device. I've got a lot of private stuff on here." She smiled thinly. "If you haven't done anything wrong, what are you afraid of?" "Privacy isn't about being afraid," I said. "It's about boundaries. My phone isn't company property." Ross raised his hands. "Fine. Then we won't take the phone. Just open your messages and delete the client contacts while we watch." "No," I said. "Still not okay." His wife snorted. "See? What did I tell you?" She said to Ross. "One little test and his true colors show. He's hiding something." Ross's face hardened again. "You really are ungrateful," he said quietly. "My wife dragged me out of the room earlier saying we needed to be careful with you. Looks like she was right." He suddenly lunged forward and grabbed at my phone. "What did you send them? You trying to ruin my business?" I shoved him back. "You're paranoid." He came at me again, stronger this time, trying to pry my fingers open. He was older but heavier, and in the cramped office he managed to hook his leg behind mine. Before I knew it, I hit the floor. He straddled my torso, pinning one of my arms down, yelling, "Help me. Get the phone away from him." I swung my free fist and caught him in the jaw. We grappled, rolling across the carpet, knocking into chairs. Then something slammed into the side of my head. My vision flashed white. For a second I thought the ceiling had caved in. When my hearing came back, I realized what had happened. Ross's wife was using that heavy designer bag like a weapon, swinging the metal chain strap at my head and hands. Pain shot through my skull. I curled in, raising my hands, and felt the chain bite into my fingers and knuckles. My phone slipped from my grasp and skidded across the floor. I choked out a shout, hand pressed against the side of my head, and felt something wet on my fingers. Ross didn't care. He slapped me across the face, scrambled over, and snatched the phone. "Try hitting me again," he panted. "Go on. I've got money. I can afford a lawsuit." "Can you?" For a moment, I wanted nothing more than to get up and hit him so hard he'd forget his name. Then his words sank in. If this turned into a full-on brawl and someone called the police, things would get messy fast. And I still had 3 million reasons not to let that happen. I swallowed my rage. "Fine," I said. "I'm not touching you again. But in a minute, you're going to regret touching me." Ross threw his head back and laughed. "The only thing I regret is giving you $3,000, you parasite. You're fired. Effective immediately." He shoved the locked phone in my face. "Tell me the passcode. Right now." Unlock it, or you're not leaving this building. I ignored him, grabbed a tissue from his desk, and dabbed at the blood near my hairline. My head was throbbing, my hand stung, and every bone in my body felt like it had been stepped on. I'm not going anywhere, I said calmly. Not yet. I want a front row seat for what's coming. His wife cursed, grabbed her bag again, and swung it toward my shoulder. You leech. You think you can scare us? Open the phone. Before she could land another hit, the office door burst open. Heather barreled in, out of breath. Hey, she gasped. There's a problem. Those suppliers are back. And they brought people. Ross snapped, tell them I'm not here. Heather shook her head frantically. They're already in the elevator. Security tried to stop them, but there's too many. Almost as if on cue, a rough voice shouted from outside the office. Ross. We know you're in there. Time to pay what you owe. Ross shot me a murderous look. You stay put, he growled. I'll deal with them. Then I'll deal with you. He straightened his shirt, wiped the blood from his lip, and opened the door, walking into the outer office like everything was fine. He didn't make it far. Mike was standing there in the middle of a crowd of vendors, invoices in hand. A couple of guys with tattoos and hard faces flanked him like unpaid bodyguards. Ross forced a smile. Mike. You should have called. I would have set up a meeting. Called so you could ghost me again? Mike cut in. Let's skip the games. You've been dodging us for months. You owe us money. A lot of money. You've been landing new projects, but somehow you're always broke when it's time to pay us. Ross gave an embarrassed laugh. The economy is rough, my friend. You know that. We just need one more project to land. Once the client pays, I'll take care of everyone. You have my word. Maybe years ago, people believed that. But not today. Mike's patience snapped. Cut the speeches. Your company just received $3 million. We've seen the screenshot. You really gonna stand there and cry poor? Ross blanched and glanced at his wife. Who told you that? Mike shrugged. Can't say. But I can always confirm with your client if you want. Ross hesitated, then cleared his throat. Fine. There was a transfer. But it's already earmarked for other debts. There's nothing left for you. While he was talking, I noticed his wife standing to the side, rapidly typing on her phone. I didn't have to guess what she was doing. She was texting Heather, telling her to move any remaining funds out of the company accounts immediately, so they could claim they were empty. What she didn't know was that the accounts were already empty. Because Heather had sent every last cent to me. They were acting in a play where the ending had already been written, and I was the only one who'd seen the script. Mike jerked his chin at one of the guys beside him. The guy stepped forward, grabbed Ross by the collar, and lifted him onto his toes. Pay up, he said quietly. Or you're not walking out of here tonight. Ross flailed, genuinely panicking now. We're a legitimate business. This is illegal. If you touch me again, I'll call the cops. Go ahead, Mike said. When the police ask why we're here, we'll show them the unpaid invoices and the transfer record. They can help us collect. Someone slapped Ross across the face. Then another. He sputtered, blood at the corner of his mouth, alternating between cursing and threatening to dial 911. At that point, his wife finally stepped in, putting on her best reasonable businesswoman face. Everyone, please, she said, hands raised. Ross isn't lying. We believe in integrity. If we had money, do you really think we'd hold back? Tell you what. I'll have Heather pull up every company account. If there's a single dollar in there, we'll give it to you. Ross latched onto the idea immediately. Yes. All of it. We won't keep a penny. Heather will show you the balances. Right on time, Heather came running back into the office, face pale, breathing hard. There's a problem, she stammered. There's no money. Like, none. The room went quiet. Ross blinked. What do you mean, no money? She looked like she was about to cry. I checked all the accounts. There's 25 cents left. Everything else is gone. Ross shoved past everyone and bolted to her desk. I heard frantic clicking, then a roar that shook the walls. Are you out of your mind? He screamed. You transferred $3 million to Cole's account and didn't double check it? Heather sobbed, you were rushing me. 1 minute you wanted 30,000, then 3,000, then attendance reports, then transfers. I got confused. Mike and the other vendors turned slowly to look at me. I raised my hands. Don't look at me. I tried to tell Heather earlier. She told me I was deaf and to take it up with Ross. Heather pointed at me, tears streaming. You knew it was wrong and you didn't say anything. I did say something, I replied. You called me names and told me to stop bothering you. So I took your advice. At that point, everyone in the room understood exactly what had happened. The money was in my account. Ross had nothing. Mike stepped closer. "Brother," he said quietly. "You're in a unique position. That money is yours to control. But Ross owes us a lot. You told me on the phone we'd settle up today. You still stand by that?" I glanced at Ross and his wife, both of them pale, shaking, furious. I took a deep breath. "Yeah," I said. "We settle today." Ross staggered back into the room, face ashy. "Cole, if you move a single dollar, I'll call the police. This is unjust enrichment. It's illegal. You'll go to jail." I pulled out my phone and showed him the latest notification from my bank. "Too late," I said. "I already withdrew $50,000. That's my daily limit." He stared at me, speechless. "30,000 is the commission you promised me," I added. "The other 20 is for the concussion and the bruise on my leg. Medical bills. Pain and suffering. Call your lawyer if you don't like it." He started shaking with rage. "You criminal. You think quoting legal terms makes you right? I'm calling the cops." He grabbed his wife's phone. She was already halfway through dialing when Mike raised his voice. "By all means," Mike said. "Call them. Once the case is open, assets get frozen. Then we can sue properly and guarantee we get paid." Ross froze. His wife hissed at him, "If they freeze the money, we can't fund the new project. We'll default on the contracts. We'll be finished." Ross pushed her hand away from the phone. "No cops," he muttered. "Not yet." His wife rounded on him. "Then what do we do?" He stared at me, eyes glassy. Finally, he walked over, shoulders slumped, and actually sank to his knees. "Cole," he said hoarsely. "I was wrong. I'm a terrible person. I admit it. I've been greedy, selfish, everything you think I am. Please give the money back. Without it, the company is done." I looked at him for a long moment. "It's strange," I said quietly. "When you were underpaying employees, delaying invoices, pushing people out, you didn't seem too worried about whether the company would survive. Now suddenly it matters." He swallowed. What do you want?" I glanced at his wife, who was standing stiffly behind him, arms crossed, still wearing that expensive bag. "You said relationships are mutual," I reminded her. "You hurt someone, you make it right. You should know what to do." She frowned, confused. Ross looked up at her, then down, then back at me. Something flickered in his eyes. And then, to everyone's shock, he stood up, grabbed his wife's bag off her shoulder, and swung it at her. The metal chain caught her hard enough to knock her sideways. She screamed and went down, clutching her head. The whole room froze. For a moment, all I could do was stare. "Are you insane?" she shrieked, scrambling to her feet, mascara running. "Have you lost your mind?" Ross grabbed her arms and tried to calm her down. "I'm doing it for the company. Cole got hurt, and he wants things to be mutual. How is he going to forgive us if you don't show you're sorry?" That was not what I meant. Honestly, I'd been thinking something simple. An apology. Covering my medical bills. Anything remotely human. Not this. She turned to me, hair wild. "Is that true? If I get hurt too, will you give the money back?" I coughed. I said I'd consider it. She wiped her eyes, took a breath, and then, in one vicious move, kicked Ross as hard as she could between the legs. He folded to the floor, face drained of all color, a broken sound ripping from his throat. I just stood there, stunned. I'd heard the phrase "same bed, same roof," meaning people mirror each other in a marriage. But watching these two go at each other like that was something else. When Ross finally caught his breath again, his wife clung to his arm, sobbing. "Don't blame me. Cole said you needed to let him vent before he'd think about giving the money back." Ross stared at me, eyes bulging. "So?" he gasped. "Does this count?" I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You two are really something else," I said. "Look, here's what I'm willing to do. We'll settle accounts. Properly. I'll pay what you owe, and I'll return what I don't need. Whatever's left afterward is yours." Ross's wife blurted, "There won't be much left." I raised an eyebrow. "If that bothers you, we can always go back to the police option." No police," Ross said quickly. "We'll do it your way." So right there, in front of everyone, I sat down with the invoices Mike and the other vendors handed me. 6 suppliers total. We added up every outstanding payment Ross owed them over the last few years. The total came to $2,930,000. Plus the $50,000 I'd already withdrawn, that brought us to $2,980,000, leaving roughly $20,000 sitting in my account. Ross looked like he was watching his own funeral. How is the company supposed to operate with $20,000? He croaked. His wife started crying again. We need advance capital for the new project. This isn't enough. I shrugged. That's not my problem. And who said you're getting all 20? Ross stared at me, numb. What do you mean? You fired me, I reminded him. Illegally. No notice. No severance. I've worked here 3 years. My monthly salary is $5,000. You owe me compensation. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. At least $20,000, I continued. Call it severance and damages. Honestly, that's me being generous. I grabbed a pen and scratched out the last $20,000 on the balance sheet, turning it into a neat zero. Look at that, I said. Clean slate. You owe me nothing. I owe you nothing. The rest has gone where it should have gone a long time ago. Ross stared at the paper, face twitching. Then he let out a strangled sound, took one step back, and collapsed. His wife shrieked and ran to him. Mike stepped in, slapped her hand away, and glared at her. Don't even think about pulling anything, he growled. From today on, Cole is the only reason you're not being sued into dust. You touch him, you answer to all of us. Over the next month, I did exactly what I'd promised. Every day, I went to the bank and withdrew the maximum allowed from my account, then wired the money out to the vendors according to the plan we'd written down. It took a while. I could have rushed it. I didn't. I wanted time to see if Ross and his wife would try anything behind my back. They didn't. Or maybe they couldn't. By the time the last payment was made, every supplier Ross had stiffed for years had finally been paid in full. They treated me like some kind of savior. Mike, especially, wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept insisting I join his company. You know projects, he said. You know clients. You've got the contacts, the grit, and now the reputation. People will follow you. In the end, I agreed. I'd spent years building relationships and learning how to keep messy campaigns from falling apart. Now, with someone who actually respected that work, things took off. We expanded faster than any of us had expected. New clients came through the door because word got around, we paid on time, we didn't play games, and we treated people decently. As for Ross and his company? I didn't hear much at first. Just rumors. His name was mud in the industry. No one wanted to work with him. He couldn't get new projects without advance capital, and no one trusted him enough to front it. Eventually, his cash flow dried up. Small companies don't survive long once the money stops moving. It wasn't long before his company folded completely. The last time I heard anything concrete about them was by accident. I'd caught a mild cold and went to the hospital for a quick checkup. On my way out, I stopped by the restroom, and as I stepped into the hallway, I nearly walked into a janitor mopping the floor. She wore a mask, head down. Something about her seemed familiar. Then she looked up. It was Heather. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, drained, like life had scraped off 10 years in one go. She froze when she realized it was me. You, she said, eyes filling with tears. You must be happy now. We lost everything because of you. I blinked. Because of me? She nodded furiously. My sisters had constant headaches ever since. That fight. The doctors say there was damage. She's on medication. My brother-in-law, she swallowed, can't be intimate anymore. The business collapsed. He had a breakdown. Developed a severe mental disorder. And me? My boyfriend left when he realized I'd lost my job and was taking care of 2 sick people. I'm mopping hospital floors now, barely getting by. Our whole family is ruined. You did this. I stared at her for a long second. Who hit your sister? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Ross did. And who kicked Ross? She looked away. My sister. Then why, I asked, are you standing here telling me I'm the one who ruined your lives? She opened her mouth and shut it again. No sound came out. Look, I said, adjusting my jacket. I didn't force Ross to withhold my bonus. I didn't make him dodge your vendors. I didn't tell him to weaponize my attendance records. I definitely didn't ask him to beat his own wife or get kicked where it hurts. I just stopped him from using his money to hurt other people. That's all. She glared at me, shaking, but there was nothing left to say. I walked past her and out of the hospital, the smell of disinfectant fading behind me. I'm not telling this story to brag about some clever revenge. I'm not some mastermind. I was just a tired employee who got pushed too far and, for once, had the leverage to push back. I'm telling it because some bosses really need the reminder. You're already rich. You own the company, the shares, the assets. Is it really necessary to squeeze every last dollar out of the people keeping your business alive? Because here's the truth nobody like Ross wants to hear. When you starve your employees, skip their bonuses, play word games with your promises, and treat them like disposable parts, you aren't just saving a little money. You're lighting a fuse. And the day that fuse reaches the end, the person who has nothing might decide they have nothing left to lose. Maybe they walk away quietly. Maybe they burn everything down on the way out. In my case, all it took was one mistyped transfer, one $3 million mistake, to show Ross exactly how expensive his greed really was. If you're a boss like him, do yourself a favor. Be a decent human being.